The dusty winds of New Mexico Territory howled like a wounded animal as Clara Reynolds watched her husband's body being lowered into the hard, unforgiving earth. April 1878 had brought nothing but heartache to the young widow, and at 23 years old she found herself utterly alone in the small mining town of Silver Creek. Thomas Reynolds had been a kind man, a miner who had promised her the world but delivered only 6 months of marriage before a cave-in took his life. "My sincerest condolences, Mrs. Reynolds," said Hiram Blackett, the mine owner and richest man in Silver Creek. His words were coated with sympathy, but his eyes held something that made Clara's skin crawl. "I know this must be difficult for you." Clara nodded, her throat too tight for words. She clutched the small leather pouch containing Thomas's wedding ring and pocket watch, the only valuables they had owned. The small crowd dispersed as the last shovelful of dirt was patted down. Clara remained, staring at the crude wooden cross marking her husband's final resting place. "You should come by my office tomorrow," Blackett said, lingering behind the others. "We need to discuss your situation." "Thomas owed me money, you see." Clara's head snapped up. "That can't be right. Thomas was always careful with our finances." Blackett's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Gambling debts, my dear? Not everyone is as they seem. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. As he walked away, Clara sank to her knees beside the fresh grave. "Is it true, Thomas?" she whispered. "Did you leave me with nothing but debt?" The wind answered with another mournful howl. The next morning, Clara entered Blackett's office with her head held high despite having barely slept. The office was opulent compared to the rest of the town, with polished wood furniture and heavy curtains blocking the harsh sun. "Ah, Mrs. Reynolds," Blackett said, not bothering to stand. "Prompt. I like that in a woman." "Mr. Blackett," Clara acknowledged stiffly. "There must be some mistake about Thomas's debts. We had very little, but he was honest." Blackett pulled out a ledger and pushed it toward her. $200, Mrs. Reynolds. Your husband borrowed against future earnings to play cards at my establishment. Unfortunately, luck wasn't on his side." Clara stared at the numbers, recognizing Thomas's signature at the bottom of each page. Her stomach twisted painfully as she realized the truth. "I don't have that kind of money." "I'm aware," Blackett said, closing the ledger with a snap. "But you do have value in other ways." Clara recoiled, understanding his implication immediately. "I would rather starve." Blackett laughed. "Noble sentiment, but unnecessary. I'm not proposing anything so crude. I have business associates heading west who are looking for wives. Proper women are scarce on the frontier." He leaned forward. "I can arrange a marriage for you. The debt would be forgiven." "You want to sell me?" Clara whispered, horror washing over her. "I prefer to think of it as an arrangement of mutual benefit. You need freedom from debt, and these men need wives." He shrugged. "The alternative is debtor's prison or worse. This town isn't kind to women without means." Clara's hands trembled. "I need time to think." "You have until tomorrow," Blackett said. "Don't disappoint me." Clara fled the office, her mind racing. Their small cabin was a quarter-mile outside town, and by the time she reached it, tears were streaming down her face. Inside, she collapsed onto the bed she had shared with Thomas, and allowed herself to break down completely. When her tears were spent, Clara took inventory of their meager possessions. Nothing of value except Thomas's pocket watch, which wouldn't fetch nearly enough to cover the debt. She had no family to turn to, having been orphaned young before meeting Thomas. Clara slept fitfully that night, and in the morning, she made her decision. With no real choice at all, she returned to Blackett's office. "I see wisdom has prevailed," he said when she entered. "I've arranged everything. The wagon train leaves in 3 days. Your intended is paying handsomely for a bride of your quality. Fair-haired, educated women are in high demand." Clara felt sick but kept her expression neutral. "Who is this man?" "A rancher in the Arizona Territory." Good land, solid prospects. More than Thomas could have provided. Blackett shuffled papers on his desk. You'll stay at the boarding house until departure. I've taken the liberty of selling your cabin to cover incidentals. You had no right, Clara said, anger flaring. Actually, I did. The deed reverted to me upon Thomas's death, as part of the collateral. He smiled thinly. Pack your things. Mrs. Harrison at the boarding house expects you by sundown. 3 days later, Clara sat rigidly in a wagon beside a stern-faced woman named Mrs. Winters who had been hired to chaperone her to Arizona. The wagon train consisted of 12 vehicles, mostly filled with supplies, hopeful settlers, and a few mail-order brides like herself. You're luckier than most, Mrs. Winters said as they pulled out of Silver Creek. At least you're going to be a rancher's wife. Better than a miner or a farmer. Less work. Clara said nothing, watching her brief life with Thomas disappear into the distance. She clutched her small bag containing a change of clothes, Thomas's pocket watch, and a daguerreotype of her parents. Everything else was gone. The journey was grueling. April gave way to May, and the heat grew oppressive as they moved southwest. Clara kept to herself, avoiding the curious glances of the other travelers. She learned that 2 other women were traveling as arranged brides, but neither seemed as reluctant as she was. Near the border of Arizona Territory, disaster struck. A band of outlaws descended on the wagon train at dawn. Clara woke to gunfire and screams. Mrs. Winters pushed her under the wagon. Stay down! The older woman hissed before scrambling away. Clara huddled beneath the wagon, watching boots run past and hearing more gunshots. A man fell nearby, blood pooling around him. She recognized him as one of the wagon drivers. The attack was brief but devastating. When it ended, 5 men lay dead, including the wagon master. Mrs. Winters was nowhere to be found. The outlaws had taken most of the supplies and several horses before disappearing. We can't continue like this, announced a man named Cooper who had assumed leadership. We're 2 days from Willow Springs. I'll take 2 men and ride ahead for help. Clara emerged from hiding, shaken but unharmed. The other mail-order brides had survived, though one had a bullet graze on her arm. They helped tend to the wounded while waiting for Cooper's return. That evening, Clara sat alone by a small fire, contemplating her fate. From bride to widow to chattel in less than a month. She wondered what kind of man was waiting for her, and whether he would be kind or cruel. Thomas had been gentle, if somewhat reckless with their finances. May I join you, madam? Clara looked up to see a tall man with broad shoulders standing respectfully at a distance. She recognized him as one of the wagon guards who had fought bravely during the attack. If you wish, she said quietly. He sat across from her, the firelight casting shadows across his weathered face. He wasn't handsome in the traditional sense, but there was something compelling about his blue eyes. Lucas Wright, he said by way of introduction. I'm sorry about what happened today. Clara Reynolds, she replied. And you have nothing to apologize for. You helped fight them off. Lucas nodded, removing his hat to reveal sandy brown hair. I'm heading to Willow Springs myself. Have family there. I'm continuing to Arizona, Clara said, not elaborating. Lucas studied her for a moment. To meet your husband? Clara looked away. To meet the man who purchased me. A long silence followed her bitter words. When Lucas spoke again, his voice was careful. Purchased? Clara found herself telling him everything: Thomas's death, the debt, Blackett's arrangement. She hadn't spoken of it to anyone, and once she started, the words poured out. Lucas listened without interruption, his expression darkening. When she finished, he tossed a stick into the fire. That's not right, Mrs. Reynolds. No person should be treated as property. I had no choice, Clara said. And now I don't even know if this rancher is still expecting me, with the wagon train delayed and Mrs. Winters gone. What's the rancher's name? Blackett didn't tell me. Said all I needed to know was that he had land and means. Lucas frowned. That doesn't sit well with me. The next morning, Cooper returned with a small rescue party from Willow Springs. The remaining wagons were reorganized, and by nightfall, they reached the small but growing settlement. Clara found herself directed to the town's only hotel, a 2-story building that seemed luxurious after weeks on the trail. A room had been arranged for her, and she was told to wait for further instructions. Alone in the room, Clara washed away the trail dust as best she could with the basin of water provided. She changed into her only decent dress, a faded blue cotton that had once been her Sunday best. Whatever happened next, she would face it with dignity. A knock at her door startled her. When she opened it, Lucas Wright stood in the hallway, hat in hand. "Mr. Wright," she said, surprised. "Is there news about continuing to Arizona? May I come in, Mrs. Reynolds?" It wouldn't be proper to discuss this in the hallway. Clara hesitated, then nodded, leaving the door open for propriety's sake. Lucas stepped inside but remained near the door. "I've made some inquiries. There's no rancher waiting for you in Arizona, Mrs. Reynolds." Clara stared at him. "What?" "I spoke with the postmaster. He knows of all the correspondence that passes through regarding mail-order brides. Your name wasn't on any list." Lucas's jaw tightened. "I believe Black had sold you to someone else entirely." Clara sank onto the edge of the bed. "Who?" "There's a man named Dawson who runs establishments for miners and cowboys. He's always looking for women." Horror washed over Clara as she understood. "A brothel." Lucas nodded grimly. "His representative is in town, waiting to escort you to Tucson." Clara's hands began to shake. "I can't. I won't." "You won't have to," Lucas said firmly. "I won't let that happen to you." Clara looked up at him, this stranger who showed more concern than anyone had since Thomas died. "What can we do? I have no money, nowhere to go." Lucas rubbed the back of his neck. "I have a proposition, Mrs. Reynolds. Not like Blackett's," he added quickly. "I own a small ranch about 10 miles from here. It's not much yet, but the land is good. I've been saving to build it up proper." Clara waited, unsure where this was leading. "I need a wife," Lucas continued. "Not not right away. But I need a partner. Someone to help make the ranch a home while I work the land." He met her eyes directly. "I'm offering marriage, Mrs. Reynolds. A real marriage, in name at first, with all the respect you deserve." Clara's breath caught. "You barely know me." "I know enough," Lucas said. "I know you're brave and resilient. I know you deserve better than what Black had arranged." He paused. "And I know that Thomas would want someone to protect you, not sell you." Clara stood slowly. "Why would you do this for me?" "Because it's the right thing," Lucas said simply. "And because I could use the help. Ranching alone is hard work." A small smile touched his lips. "I'll be the man he wanted you to have. Someone who respects you." Clara studied him, this tall, serious man with kind eyes who was offering her safety and dignity. "When would this happen?" "Tonight, if you're willing." "The preacher owes me a favor, and it would be best to be legally married before Dawson's man realizes what's happening." It was madness to consider marrying a virtual stranger. Yet wasn't that exactly what she had resigned herself to with Blackett's arrangement? At least Lucas was offering her respect and safety rather than servitude. "Yes," Clara said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "I accept your proposal, Mr. Wright." The ceremony was brief, conducted in the preacher's small home with his wife and the hotel proprietor as witnesses. Clara wore her blue dress, and Lucas had somehow found a wildflower for her to hold. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Lucas gently took her hand but didn't attempt to kiss her. They left town immediately, before dawn, in Lucas's wagon. Clara sat beside him, a new gold band on her finger, wondering if she had made another mistake, or found unexpected salvation. "It's not much," Lucas said as they approached a modest cabin nestled against a hillside with a small barn and corral nearby. "But it's paid for, and the land has good water." Clara took in the simple homestead. It was smaller than her cabin with Thomas, but it looked solid and well maintained. "I'll sleep in the barn until you're comfortable with other arrangements," Lucas said as he helped her down from the wagon. Clara looked at him in surprise. "That's not necessary. I agreed to be your wife. In name for now," Lucas reminded her. "I meant what I said, Clara. I want you to have time to know me before anything else happens between us." The consideration in his words touched her deeply. Thomas had been kind, but never this thoughtful about her feelings. The cabin was clean but sparse, a table with 2 chairs, a cookstove, shelves with a few provisions, and a single bed with a patchwork quilt. Lucas brought in her bag and showed her where he kept things. "I'll bring in water for you to freshen up," he said. "Then I need to tend to the animals." Alone in the cabin, Clara ran her fingertips over the rough-hewn table, the worn but clean quilt, the single cup and plate set carefully on a shelf. This was to be her home now, with a man she barely knew. Yet somehow, she felt safer than she had since Thomas's death. The following days established a routine. Lucas worked from dawn until dusk, tending to the small herd of cattle, repairing fences, and preparing fields for planting. Clara took charge of the cabin, cooking, cleaning, and starting a small kitchen garden with seeds Lucas had purchased in town. They were polite with each other, careful. Lucas slept in the barn despite Clara's protests about the cooling night temperatures. They shared meals and conversation, slowly learning about one another. Lucas had come west from Tennessee after the war, working as a cowhand until he saved enough for his own land. He spoke little about his family, only that his parents had died of fever when he was young, and he had been raised by an uncle. Clara told him about her childhood in Ohio, losing her parents to influenza when she was 16, and meeting Thomas when he passed through her town on his way west. She had been working as a seamstress, saving every penny while dreaming of adventure. "And did you find it? Adventure?" Lucas asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Clara considered the question. "Not the kind I imagined. But I found something in myself I didn't know was there. Strength, perhaps." Lucas nodded. "You have that in abundance." A month passed, then 2. June brought scorching heat that turned the grass golden and made work harder. Lucas would return each evening exhausted, his shirt soaked with sweat, but he never complained. Clara learned to have cool water waiting for him and adjusted their mealtimes to the cooler hours. One evening, Lucas returned with supplies from town, including fabric for Clara and a small journal with a pencil. "I noticed you like to write," he said when she looked at him questioningly. "I've seen you using scraps of paper." The thoughtfulness of the gift brought tears to her eyes. "Thank you. No one's given me something like this before." Lucas looked pleased but embarrassed. "It's nothing fancy. It's perfect," Clara said, running her fingers over the simple leather cover. As summer progressed, Clara found herself watching Lucas more and more, the way his hands moved confidently over tasks, the rare smile that transformed his serious face, the gentle way he treated the animals. She began to look forward to their evening conversations, the only time they both relaxed. Lucas never pressed for more intimacy, true to his word. He continued sleeping in the barn, though Clara had begun to wonder what it would be like to have him beside her at night. The thought both frightened and intrigued her. In late July, disaster struck again. Clara was hanging laundry when she noticed smoke rising from the far pasture. Fire spread quickly in the dry summer heat, and within minutes, flames were visible on the horizon. She ran toward the barn, knowing Lucas was working in that direction. Halfway there, she saw him racing toward her, his face streaked with soot. "Get whatever you can from the cabin," he shouted. "The fire's coming fast." Clara grabbed the important items, their documents, Lucas's father's watch, her journal, Thomas's pocket watch, and a small box of valuables. She was throwing them into a sack when Lucas burst in, leading their 2 horses. "No time for more," he said grimly. "The wind changed. We need to get to the creek." They rode hard toward the small creek that marked the eastern boundary of the property. From there, they watched in horror as the fire swept through the pasture and reached the cabin. The dry wood caught quickly, and within an hour, their home was reduced to smoldering ruins. The barn fared slightly better, with only one wall and part of the roof destroyed. The cattle had scattered, but Lucas was confident most would be recovered. The real loss was the cabin and their winter feed stores. That night, they slept under the stars beside the creek, the horses tethered nearby. Clara curled up in the single blanket they had saved, acutely aware of Lucas sitting nearby, keeping watch. "We can rebuild," he said quietly. "I have some savings." Clara sat up. "I'm sorry about the cabin. It's just wood and nails," Lucas replied. "We're safe. That's what matters." The "we" struck Clara powerfully. In just a few months, they had become a unit, partners in this life. She moved closer to him, and after a moment's hesitation, leaned against his shoulder. He stiffened in surprise, then cautiously put his arm around her. "Lucas," she said softly, "thank you for saving me. Not just from the fire, but from everything." He looked down at her, his expression unreadable in the darkness. "You don't need to thank me for that." "I do," she insisted. "You've been nothing but honorable, even when you didn't have to be." Lucas was quiet for a long moment. "When I saw you by that fire the night of the attack, something told me you were special. Worth protecting." His voice grew rougher. "I never expected to care for you the way I do now." Clara's heart quickened at his words. "And how is that?" Instead of answering, Lucas gently tilted her face up and kissed her. It was tentative at first, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she didn't, the kiss deepened, conveying months of unspoken feelings. When they finally broke apart, Clara was breathless. "I think I've been waiting for that," she admitted. Lucas smiled, a real, unguarded smile that transformed his face. "I've wanted to do that since our wedding day." They spent the night in each other's arms, talking, sharing more kisses, but going no further. Lucas was still determined to be honorable, and Clara found his restraint both frustrating and endearing. The next day, they rode to town for supplies. The news of their cabin's destruction prompted an unexpected response from the community. Neighbors Lucas barely knew offered assistance, and by evening, a rebuilding party had been organized for the following week. "I didn't realize people cared," Lucas said as they rode back toward their property, plans to stay with a neighboring family until the cabin was rebuilt. "You've helped others," Clara pointed out. "The Johnsons said you helped them round up cattle last winter when Mr. Johnson was sick." Lucas shrugged. "That was nothing." "It wasn't nothing to them," Clara said. "Just like what you did for me wasn't nothing." They reached the creek where they had left their salvaged belongings hidden. As they collected their things, Clara spotted riders approaching 3 men she didn't recognize. Lucas tensed, positioning himself between Clara and the strangers. "That's far enough," he called when they were within hearing distance. "State your business." The lead rider, a burly man with a thick mustache, reined in his horse. "Looking for a woman. Blonde, pretty. Name of Clara Reynolds. Supposed to be coming through here a few months back." Clara stiffened, and Lucas's hand moved to his holstered revolver. "What do you want with her?" Lucas demanded. "Got paid to escort her to Tucson," the man said. "My employer's getting impatient. Heard she might have stopped in these parts." "There's no one by that name here," Lucas said firmly. "Just me and my wife, Clara Wright." The man's eyes narrowed as he studied Clara. "She fits the description. My wife and I have lived here over a year." Lucas lied smoothly. "Now we've lost our home to fire and have no hospitality to offer. I suggest you continue your search elsewhere." The tension stretched between them. Clara held her breath, her hand finding Lucas's free one and squeezing tightly. Finally, the man nodded. "Might be I got bad information. Sorry to trouble you, madam," he said, tipping his hat to Clara. "Good luck with rebuilding." They watched the riders leave, either moving until they were well out of sight. "Dawson's men," Lucas said grimly. They're still looking for you. Clara trembled. Will they come back? Not if they believe you're someone else entirely. Lucas turned to face her. We need to make sure everyone knows you as Clara Wright, my wife of more than a year. No connection to Reynolds or Silver Creek. Clara nodded, still shaken by how close they had come to discovery. Lucas, if they had taken me, they wouldn't have, he said fiercely. I wouldn't let that happen. The determination in his voice sparked something inside her, a rush of emotion that overwhelmed her. I love you, she blurted out, surprising them both. Lucas stared at her for a heartbeat, then pulled her into his arms. I love you too, he whispered against her hair. God help me, I do. The rebuilding of their cabin took just 5 days with the help of neighbors. The new structure was larger than the original, with proper windows and a separate bedroom, a wedding gift, the neighbors said with knowing smiles that made Clara blush. Their first night in the new cabin, Lucas hesitated at the bedroom door. I can still sleep in the barn until, Lucas Wright, Clara interrupted, taking his hand. You are my husband in every way but one. I think it's time to remedy that. The nervousness in his eyes was replaced with something deeper as she led him to their new bed. That night, their marriage was truly consummated, with tenderness and passion that left them both breathless and wondering why they had waited so long. In the quiet aftermath, as they lay tangled together, Lucas traced patterns on her bare shoulder. I want you to know something, he said. I never thought I'd find someone like you. Someone who makes me want to be a better man. Clara kissed him softly. You already are the best of men. Autumn came, bringing cooler temperatures and the promise of winter. The cattle were recovered, the barn rebuilt, and their home was cozy and warm. Clara discovered she was with child just before Thanksgiving, news that had Lucas walking around for days with a dazed, joyful expression. As Christmas approached, Clara received an unexpected letter forwarded through the town's postmaster. It was from Mrs. Winters, who had survived the attack but been taken to a different settlement to recover from injuries. She says Blackett was arrested, Clara told Lucas as she read the letter. Apparently, he had been running this scheme with several women, selling them to brothels while claiming they were going to legitimate marriages. The territorial marshal caught up with him. Lucas nodded with grim satisfaction. Justice, finally. Clara set the letter aside, resting her hand on her slightly rounded belly. I sometimes think about how differently things could have turned out if you hadn't been on that wagon train. But I was, Lucas said, covering her hand with his. Some things are meant to be, Clara. I believe that now. On Christmas morning, they exchanged simple gifts: a new hat Clara had secretly made for Lucas, and a rocking chair he had commissioned from the town's carpenter for her. For when the baby comes, he explained as she ran her hands over the smooth wood. As they sat before the fire that night, Clara in her new chair and Lucas at her feet, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the depths of grief and desperation to this moment of perfect contentment, it had been less than a year. What are you thinking about? Lucas asked, looking up at her. Clara smiled, taking his hand and placing it on her belly where their child grew. I was thinking about promises. Thomas promised me adventure. Blackett promised me servitude disguised as security. Her eyes met his. But you, Lucas Wright, you promised to be the man Thomas would have wanted for me. And you've been so much more. Lucas rose to his knees, framing her face with his hands. I promise you this, Clara Wright. Every day for the rest of our lives, I will try to be worthy of you. I will love you and our children with everything I have. I know you will, Clara whispered. That's why I love you. As the fire crackled and the winter wind sang around their snug cabin, Clara knew that sometimes salvation came in unexpected forms. Hers had come in the shape of a quiet cowboy with gentle hands and a fierce determination to do what was right. Lucas had given her more than safety or security; he had given her a love that transformed both their lives. And in the wild, unforgiving landscape of the Arizona Territory, that was the greatest treasure of all.